You may have realized in the recent past that it didn't become any easier to find talent, to attract talent, to retain talent, and to develop talent in your organization. You might have realized that you have a very high employee turnover or a raised, let's say, an elevated level of employee turnover, or even depending on the industry in which you work, it might be extremely high. We see that there's a very high employee turnover. However, most countermeasures that organizations use to face that employee turnover did not work. The employee turnover is as high as it has been before. And now you have to see, where do you find talent? How do you attract talent? How do you get that talent into your organization? How do you develop them to a level that they actually are a valuable member of your staff, but also how to make them stay? And we're talking about that. Why do employees really leave organizations? What is the reason why people say, thank you very much, moving on? Because often people think, isn't that a bit of a change that puts a certain risk on you? You have a new probation time, you might be fired, you might not like it, new colleagues might not be as nice. Yes, well, that could happen. However, most people prefer to do that over working for you or for the organizations we have on the market right now. What is the reason for that? Of course, we have to look into the problem and how to do it better as well. And leadership is a huge issue, and we often have very unacceptable statements, which we see at the moment. I can recommend you one group on Facebook where people quit their jobs by text. That is probably the most shocking side I've seen in quite a long time. However, another issue which we face anywhere in the world is that marketing, and especially marketing when it comes to talent. So when HR recruits, often the promises and the reality do not really align. And the delta you see in between is the space where people think, maybe I have to move on, because people are willing to leave even by short notice, even when they don't know what to do next. And I had one of these cases just recently in my circle of friends. I can give you the example. And the example was the following. A person was hired and they said they want to work from home. And the company said, work from home, absolutely possible any day, except when you are needed in the office, then you have to be in the office. And of course, that was fine for everyone. So the job starts, and then they said, well, as soon as you are fully qualified, you can work from home. But in the beginning, you have to be in the office from Monday to Friday from 9 to 5. And that was a bit of a surprise, not a positive one. You should have said that before, but my friend accepted, worked there 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. So the probation time comes to an end, and now the person is fully qualified and they can work on their own. And suddenly they say, well, this whole work from home thing, we need you in the office quite a lot, so you have to see which days might be possible, pre-agree them with your manager a couple of weeks in advance, and he might shuffle these days around a bit, even by short notice. And then they were very surprised when my friend just quit. My friend quit, and that person didn't have a job at that time. They quit and said, thank you very much, I'm leaving, without having a new job. And what they did is they went on LinkedIn, clicked on a switch where it said, I'm open to work. And suddenly just offers flooded in, 40 offers within 3 days. And then they picked the 4 they wanted to have a chat with, had a chat with the next 3 days. And about a week later, a new contract was signed. So there's no risk of unemployment if you still think that. And now we have to see, why do people really leave organization? And there are studies on the market. There are reasons why people leave organizations. However, today, when we look at how to do it better, we also put a focus on a specific group, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So why do people leave? Normally, number one, and Gallup, you probably know Gallup does a lot of studies there. Normally, reason number one is always leadership behavior. But surprise and good news for leaders, not this time. Reason number one is not leadership behavior. However, leadership behavior still is in the top 3, so not that much of a change. Reason number one at the moment is a lack of personal development. People simply say there's either no qualification available whatsoever, or the qualification only focuses on the job that I do. And of course, now some people might say, well, of course it focuses on the job that you do. What else do you expect? And there's no problem with being qualified or getting updated and qualified for the future of the job that you do. However, don't tell people that you invest in them, because that is a skill that is needed by the organization. People need this skill, otherwise they can't work for you. So you don't offer these trainings because you're a good person or you want something better for them. The only reason why you offer these courses is you want something from them and you need them to be qualified. And what people are really looking for, and that is where the personal development starts, is when people say, is there anything beyond that? For example, soft skills, business skills, people skills, communication, conflict management, leadership, negotiation training, etc., etc., etc. All these means of development are often not available in your organization, or they are so limited on such a low scale that people say, this is just not enough. Thank you very much. I go somewhere else where I'm a bit more appreciated. So that is reason number one. There is no space or no offer for personal development. Reason number two, and I already hear people groan, especially senior leaders groan about it because they think, oh, do I really have to deal with that? Yes, you have to. And reason number two why people leave is they do not feel connected to the company's purpose or to the staff. And now they're normally at two aspects where senior leaders, executives criticize staff. They often say, well, no one wants to work anymore. By the way, that line exists since the 1900s. Stop doing that. When people want to work less hours for you, probably think about why this is the case instead of criticizing them for being lazy. I know that you might have worked the 50 hours week. I did the same, but what we did back in the days is not relevant to today's challenges because no one needs a leader that says, oh, back in the days when everything was better, because it wasn't. So when you look into the company's purpose, is there any, and last week we already talked about mission, vision, and value statements. Many organizations don't have them, or they are not credible, or it was a top-down process. There are lots of errors done often when they are implemented or designed. What is your company's purpose? Do people truly and genuinely feel connected to the company's purpose? And of course, the next point of criticism from leaders is, well, you cannot say you're not connected to staff. You don't feel connected because you want to work from home, and you can't be connected when you work from home. And that is plain wrong. You can feel connected, for example, and this is just one means of many, when you do online socials. And by the way, not the online social which you offer on Friday evening at 5 p.m. where you say no one turns up. What a miracle when you offer online socials after work and didn't care about it during the week. Of course, no one shows up because you did it wrong in the first place. Company socials are part of what you have to do when you work in a work from home or work from anywhere environment. It is your job as a leader to keep the team connected. And when people say they feel disconnected, the very first person you have to talk to is the leader. It is the leader's fault when the team falls apart. So I gave you means now how to do it better, but be sure that company's purpose, which is something you cannot do on your own, when people don't feel connected to the company's purpose, or they don't know it, or it doesn't even publicly exist, or maybe it exists, but it was never communicated. When people do not feel genuinely connected to the company's purpose or the staff, then you can already say goodbye to them because they will leave anyway and go somewhere where they feel connected. And aspect number three, I already told you, top three, leadership behavior. And I will give you an appalling example of what a leader said just recently. And that was one of the examples where I really wondered, how can people be in a senior leadership position and say something like that? But I will get to it in a minute, because there is a special case that the Boston Consulting Group now focused on, the so-called deskless workers. What are deskless workers? Deskless workers are people, for example, who work for health services, who take care of you when you're sick, who work in hospital, nurses, for example, or people who work in an IT department and do the physical work, putting the cables in the wall, or people who work in a production plant somewhere, in a factory, working physically, but not as a desk, the so-called deskless workers. And the employee turnover is even higher when you have deskless workers. And the reason is very simple. People now see, oh, look, work from home, work from anywhere is available. I'm going to requalify. In many states, by the way, that is even possible with taxpayers' money funded, which, by the way, is correct, because one reason you pay taxes is because you have qualified staff, or you expect qualified staff to be available on the market. So when you see that you have deskless workers and the employee turnover is higher there, it is your job to change something. So step number one is more flexible work according to their needs. And now, of course, people often complain, what's next? I mean, now I suddenly have to align to the people's needs and I can't tell them when they have to work. Exactly. And by the way, the other news, there's great software out there that your teams can set up the schedule by themselves, getting it all sorted. I did it in my company before I sold it, and it works perfectly well. You only have to care, and you have to stop thinking that they all have to listen to you. But some leaders are obsessed with the position that they enjoy the power, that they have power over other people's lives. And when you now feel that you might be one of them, you should reconsider your position as a leader, because your time might be over, or at least you have to adjust your attitude. So step number one, more flexible working time according to their needs, which you have to evaluate and which you have to ask them about. Step number two is more benefits. And that is a really crazy one where I've seen appalling examples in the recent past. So, for example, and one thing even went through the internet, it happened in Germany, where you saw water bottles. Maybe you remember that just recently. We had quite a heat wave, probably across the world. That's due to climate change. And when you see that we have 35 degrees and then you see water bottles, and that happened in Germany, where someone put a sign on the bottles which said, you can only take a water bottle out here for free when the temperature is higher than 30 degrees Celsius, which is really hot. It's nearly impossible to properly work then. So when it's 28, no. So for the people in Fahrenheit, we are talking about the highest 2-digit, 3-digit numbers. So it gets really warm. But people say, hey, when it's not too hot, no, 2 degrees lower, now you have to pay for the water or bring your own. And the problem is often that people only think within their budget. I just give you an example. I talked to an organization and said, why don't you offer free water for your whole organization? And then someone told me, if I buy for my mid-sized business, when I buy water for all the people for the whole year, that cost me about 9,000 euros a year. 9,000 euros a year, so probably about $10,000. Just compare how much do you have to pay for recruiting when you only want to find one person. When you have to run more and more campaigns, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 or euros or pound or whatever currency you work in, is pretty much nothing in comparison. And by the way, don't put it in your job ad that you say we offer free water or we offer a fruit basket. This is really a nice to have. This is nothing where people say, whoa, free water. Wow. Am I allowed to wash my hands after I went to the toilet? Is that for free? Wow. So amazing. No, it's not. It's common sense to offer it, caring about people and serving their basic needs. More benefit means you have to exceed that level. You have to exceed the level of common sense where people simply expect, and rightfully so, simply expect that it will be there. Because when it's 30, 35 degrees or 100 Fahrenheit or even more in your country, 120, 130 Fahrenheit, whatever heat wave you can have somewhere in the middle of the desert in Nevada, maybe, then you have to see it is common sense that you offer water or soft drinks or whatever else. And people don't have to drop on their knees and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. No, you want them to work properly during the heat. You offer the benefits they need to do so. Step number 3 is what we already talked about. People expect support. They need to be qualified, and qualified for the job is one aspect, but personal development is the other aspect. We talked about that already. And number 4 is support and commitment on all levels. And I give you an example here, what happened in a project where I worked. It was a deskless worker in the health environment. And people said, my team lead is actually amazing. A great leader really cares. We can talk to the person every single time, every minute, always available, really caring. However, the reason I leave is nothing changes because it always goes the same way. What happens is I complain about a certain issue. My team leader really cares, then tries to fix it. However, we need management support so that then this person walks to the management and management says, yeah, it's tricky. We have to see maybe next year, the budget, blah, blah, blah. And then nothing changes. Support and commitment must be shown by all levels, not just by your next line manager. That is simply not enough anymore. And I now give you, because I promised you that I'm going to give you that example, I'm now going to give you the shocking example I talked about before. And it happened in a so-called university clinic, which is a university hospital, one of the most prestigious hospitals we have in the country in Germany. And a senior executive, someone who is highly qualified in the medical field, a respected expert, said, and I quote word by word, we now have to be nice to the nurses because otherwise no one's doing the job in the future. So when you now say we have to be nice to the nurses now, what have you done before? Were they your personal punching ball when you had your aggression with patients or whatever did you do to them? sometimes leaders really have to start listening to themselves when talking. Being nice is the 101 of being a leader. However, of course, you need more. But the main issue is that we still have leaders who are a bit obsessed and say, well, at the end of the 90s, it was really challenging. And, I entered the job market end of the 90s, high unemployment. I remember these days where organizations really could pick who they wanted to hire. Half of the people I went to uni with didn't get a job, and that was common back in the days. They searched sometimes for 2 years to find a proper job, only had other jobs to bridge the time between and get some money in to get food on the table. However, these days are over. And when you were socialized, when you grew up in these days, you probably still have the wrong attitude. And you have to adjust that, because otherwise, yes, maybe the economy is the problem. Yes, maybe inflation is the problem, but maybe the problem is you. And you have to see as a leader that you can influence all the aspects I told you about before. And that is what you have to do right now. And of course, I published about this. You can go to expert.nb-networks.com. Just put your email address in there. Every Wednesday morning, you receive an email about everything I published. Free access, no cost, only available via that email. Of course, when you say, hey, I got a question, I really need to do something in my organization. Can we have a chat? Yes, of course. The last weeks were very productive. So nb@nb-networks.com. Feel free to drop me a line and then we chat and have a discussion from there. Of course, when you want to talk about very specific, as it just happened last week, when you say, hey, we need training, speaking, coaching, consulting, or we have a mentoring project, interim management issue, or as it just happened last week, as I just said, someone called me and said, hey, we have an event. Could you speak there or could you host it? I can do so. But we can also just chat about your questions and talk about them. It doesn't cost you a single penny. Just invest of your time. nb@nb-networks.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. And by the way, if you are still listening to us, which of course I greatly appreciate, yes, we now have the change. We are only available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please spread the word. This podcast will only be continued on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much for taking the time here. Now, of course, the most important aspect is that you apply what you just heard, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the change that you want to see happening in your organization. I wish you all the best implementing these steps. I'm always there and happy to help. Now, I wish you a great rest of the week. And at the end, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.